Now, Professor Seyed Marandi may or may not have been reassured by Netanyahu's message to the Iranian leadership conveyed by President Putin on Friday. Let's find out. Professor Marandi, welcome back to the show. It's always an honor to have you with us. Are you feeling more relaxed now that Mr. Netanyahu has made his intentions of peace with Iran plain, at least to Putin?
Well, George, it's a great honor being on your show, and I think you know the answer as well as I, if not much better. Anything that Netanyahu says basically means we should be expecting the opposite. The only problem that this causes for Netanyahu is that if he does launch an attack, it will anger the Russians. And I think the reason why President Putin announced what Netanyahu said was to make it more costly for Netanyahu to carry out an attack. But it's also possible that instead of attacking Iran, he could attack Lebanon, because we saw heavy airstrikes against the people of Lebanon the night before last. Every day we're seeing murders being carried out across southern Lebanon and central Lebanon. And of course, the Western media is silent. Western governments are silent because they're all complicit, even though they are ceasefire guarantors in Lebanon, but they allow the Israelis to do whatever they want. So whether or not the Israeli regime is planning to carry out an attack on Iran, the Iranians are preparing themselves. And I can say with confidence that Iran is more prepared today than it was a couple of months ago. And if the Israeli regime strikes, the Iranians are going to strike back much harder.
Well, there was a certain panic, actually, in Tel Aviv. A rumor seemed to take hold. And I saw a member of the Knesset, a very high-ranking one, talking about it in a press conference just the other day. The rumor was that they weren't going to attack you. You were going to launch a surprise attack on them. And he seemed jolly worried about it. But I think we can rule that out, can we? If they don't attack you, Iran won't attack them?
No, I can't say that can be ruled out. There is no ceasefire between Iran and the Israeli regime. If you recall, we discussed this before. The Iranians accepted a halt in hostilities, not a ceasefire. And it was only after days of pleading by Netanyahu that Iran accepted, and the Americans gave a number of concessions to Iran. And then the Iranians, when they felt that the regime had enough, it ended the missile strikes. But we do not have a ceasefire. There's no agreement. And the Israeli regime is a threat to Iran, and it is constantly threatening Iran. So therefore, I can't say that the Iranians won't strike, because the Iranians have every right to do so. The regime constantly says that they're going to attack us, that they're going to destroy us. Officials make threats against Iran in Tel Aviv and in Al-Quds, and that's something that the Iranians take very seriously. Now, they should be afraid, of course, because Iran, as I said, is much more prepared than it was a couple of months ago. Iran's missile capabilities are much more effective, and they are prepared to hit very hard, from my understanding. And the regime last time round, they were hit by very heavy missiles, and the destruction is just it has been gradually coming out. If you recall, back then, there was not a lot of information coming out of occupied Palestine, but gradually we've been hearing over the last few weeks what sort of damage has been caused. So they know quite well what happened, and that's why they are worried. They should be worried.
How are Iran's you used to be the professor of American studies, so I know it's in your purview, in your area of expertise. How are relations between Trump and Iran right at this moment? Because I saw a story today that Trump wants peace with you.
Well, Trump speaks of peace, but during his first term, he murdered General Soleimani along with his companions and his Iraqi counterparts. Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the leader of the forces that were fighting ISIS in Iraq. So that obviously is something that Iranians still remember today. And then more recently, the Trump regime carried out airstrikes on the Iranian civilian nuclear program. So no one believes anything that Trump says, especially since the Israeli assault on Iran was carried out as Iran was negotiating with the United States. So relations are as poor as they can get. And the Iranians are not planning to negotiate with the United States. The Iranians are not planning to negotiate with the E3 anymore. The E3 has become irrelevant for Iran because they've isolated themselves from Russia. They've burnt their bridges with China, and now after they've left the JCPOA, there's really no reason for the Iranians to deal with them. They are of no great importance anymore to Iran. So they've burnt their bridges with Tehran too. But as long as the United States behaves as it does, I do not think that there will be any negotiations. And Iran is, as we speak, building up its relationships with countries across the global majority or the global south. And as we saw in Beijing, as the Iranian relationship with China and with Russia as well has improved significantly. There have been lots of agreements, but with both countries, President Putin and President Pezeshkian had a very long meeting in China, and the Iranians have had good meetings with the Chinese as well. So the relationships are evolving. The United States is marginalizing itself by antagonizing literally everyone. So I think that in the long run, things are looking good for Iran. In the short run, it's going to continue to be difficult with the sanctions and the harassment and the potential strikes by the Israeli regime. But I think that during the first war, everyone saw that Iran came out on top, despite the Blitzkrieg attack and the first day, which was our Pearl Harbor, the only difference being that in the case of Pearl Harbor, apparently the U.S. president knew it was coming. But in the case of Iran, the Iranians were not expecting a regime change operation.
Now, before turning to, if you like, the big enchilada, the Trump peace plan, I saw that you, like me, are extremely skeptical about this mystery car crash, which murdered, if it was murder, 3 leading Qatari officials from the Emir's office and seriously wounded 2 others. And when I saw that it was a top-of-the-range Mercedes-Benz, almost certainly escorted along the road, along the highway, that it crashed because its steering wheel ceased to function. I've had a lot of Mercedes, Professor. I've never heard of such a thing, so I automatically went into suspicious mode. And I see that you did too. What's your current thinking on that?
Well, I believe that this was an accident just as much as I believe that Charlie Kirk was murdered by a lone shooter. If you accept that, then yes, you can accept this. But neither makes sense. The story that the FBI put forward about Charlie Kirk does not make sense. And Candace Owens, among others, has shown enormous flaws in the narrative. It just simply can't be true. And in this case, it doesn't make sense either. You know better than I that high-ranking diplomats are taken care of. They have. It's not only the automobiles. I mean, I simply cannot believe that a Mercedes-Benz it would have that sort of problem. But also, the driver would never be driving like some sort of madman. He's driving senior diplomats. In fact, one of the three who was killed is a member of the royal family.
Yeah.
So they were definitely being very careful to make sure that nothing happens to them. So either the Israeli regime, in my opinion, they carried out the murder, or the Egyptians did. But because the relationship between Egypt and Qatar is not good, it continues to be poor. After the Egyptians and the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Bahraini regime, these four regimes ganged up against Qatar and tried to overthrow the government, and Iran helped Qatar. And despite all that, the Qataris afterwards continued to betray Iran. But in any case, I digress. The relationship still is not good. However, I still think that if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would say that the finger should be pointed towards Tel Aviv.
In the Kirk affair also, let's turn to what they were headed for Sharm el-Sheikh for. I see that Aliyev is there, for example. So it's not just an Arab affair. It's an Arab and Muslim affair. Trump invited Iran. I presume that was given a raspberry. What's the current thinking in Tehran about the likelihood of this deal actually bringing, if not peace, at least the absence of war?
Well, Aliyev is an ally of the Israeli regime, just like almost all those people who will be gathering. And we saw the images of the Qatari senior officials and Turkish senior officials hugging senior Israeli regime officials. And that, I think, was quite outrageous. It was really sickening to watch, even though I've always seen and knew how Qatar and Turkey, the regime, how they've had close relations with the Israeli regime. In fact, I was in Doha once at the invitation of Al Jazeera many years ago when Perez arrived for an interview with Al Jazeera. Of course, he is also, by the way, he is one of those who's received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
So Qatar, they've always. I'm always disappointed with these regimes, but now I just don't care. But the images that we saw a couple of days ago were just simply disgusting. This is not going to succeed, in my opinion. The first phase, we'll see prisoners swapped, and I'm sure you've noticed that Western media doesn't say anything or says very little about all those Palestinians who are in jail. The focus is on those Israeli soldiers who were mostly soldiers who were arrested and captured by the Palestinians. But in any case, we'll see the prisoner swap most likely. But phase 2 of this deal is not going to work. The Hamas is not going to give up its weapons because it knows what's going to happen immediately afterwards. They'll be massacred. Palestinian Islamic Jihad will not give up its weapons. It knows that what will happen is that they will be wiped out immediately by the Israeli regime, and none of these leaders who are going to Egypt are going to do anything about it. Just as when Qatar was bombed by the Israeli regime with U.S. consent, no doubt, all these leaders did was that they signed a piece of paper saying that what the Israeli regime did was not nice. Nothing more. So this is going to be a dead end. At the end of the day, most probably what we're going to see is a renewal of the fighting. It may take some time, but I think that we all have to be prepared for more dark days. And that's why our activism must continue. That's why everyone has to remain active. There's much more censorship now. I mean, my X account is now being censored because what I wanted to do was to put out daily images of the massacre of the last 2 years, and now it says that I can't do so because X does not know my age. So obviously something is happening with X as with TikTok. Apparently, I look very young, but everyone has to be as active as possible. We all have to keep the pressure on the Israeli regime. We have to keep, the globe has woken up. The United States is waking up, but those who are still half asleep, wherever they may be across the world, we have to open their eyes to the reality, because the biggest defeat of the Israeli regime, I'm sure you agree, is not due to Hezbollah or Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Iran or Ansarullah. The biggest defeat is that the resistance has gone global. People across the world have woken up, and the regime is despised, and it is seen for what it is, a genocidal apartheid regime. That is the biggest defeat, and that is something that we have to build on.
Amen, amen. And I'm prepared to vouch for the fact, having embraced you warmly not that long ago. You are definitely over the age of 21. Thank you very much, as always, Professor Seyed Marandi, the favourite Iranian of this show and many others.